Oh, we're driving.
5.2 is working with trig identities still. So today's lecture is going to feel a lot like the 5.1 lecture. It's really the same thing. No, you guys actually like this one a little better because now you know where to stop. If you get to a spot, you know I'm done. Okay? So it says work on one side only of the equation. I'm going to put a question mark there because I work on one side of the equation. If you go watch Joachim's videos, he'll do stuff on both sides to try to get it to work. But I just need to point that out. You can factor, you can substitute identity, change everything to sine and cosine, just like we've been doing. Look for trig identities. What I ask you to do on these verify problems, you'll know you're working on them when you see it says verify. So what somebody is telling us is that the left-hand side is the same as the right-hand side. What I'm asking you to do is prove it. Okay? So then, whenever you start, I'm asking you put a circle around where you're starting. So you might think that's kind of a silly thing to do, but it's hard for me to follow some of these problems if you guys just start in and you're doing stuff. And then also we want to avoid situations where you go up and around the page and you come down the side and then you go back and around. Okay? Show me step by step. You guys do not have a BS in mathematics. Okay? I do. And it's hard for me to follow if you think you're doing things mentally, like you're skipping 3 or 4 steps in your head. Don't do that. You write everything down. Got it? So, looking at that first circled area, is there anything you might do? Well, what did we learn yesterday?
That's the same as cot squared. Oh.
Sine squared minus 1 is? Is?
Negative cosine squared.
Negative cosine squared. Right?
Yeah.
Okay? So, sine squared is negative, or excuse me, I should say sine squared minus 1 is negative cosine squared. We learned that yesterday. What's cosine squared over sine squared? Cotangent squared of x. This was negative, this one's positive, so it's a negative. We got there. I'm going to do this one time on the screen for you guys. We're going to do it a different way. Maybe you forgot the negative cosine squared rule that we did yesterday. So you guys might look at sine squared and go, oh, sine squared. I can write that as 1 minus cosine squared. So this sine squared is 1 minus cosine squared. I still have the negative 1. What's going to happen in the blue figure? The one's positive, one's negative, get rid of it. And you're left with negative cosine squared of x over sine squared of x, which we know is negative cotangent squared of x. So I know there are multiple pathways. There are different things. So when people come up to me and they say, well, what should I do for practice? How do I get better? At the end of today's lecture, if there, like I said yesterday, if there's something that you go, well, I would have tried it this way, put a little note on this problem and say, try a different way. When we get done with this lecture, you can do them backwards. What could I do to cotangent squared? How could I do cotangent squared? And try to get the other way. So I'm going to pick one side. Tonight, you pick the other one and go back. Ray, you had a question. Which side looks more complicated?
Left side.
Okay, so let's put a circle around this one. what I'm going to do is take the denominators, top and bottom on the other side. So I'm going to take the secant of x plus 1, bring it over here, over secant of x plus 1. I'm going to do the same thing over here. We're going to have secant of x minus 1, so we're going to go secant of x minus 1 over secant of x minus 1. Right? So this is going to allow me to create a common denominator. What is my common denominator after you get done multiplying everything out? Secant of x times secant of x is secant squared of x minus 1. Because I don't have to do the middle term again. It's the conjugate relationship, right? It's oi, positive, negative. Now we got to be careful here. Up top, right here, multiplying by 1, I get secant of x plus 1. But here, this right-hand term is negative. So I have to take a negative 1 times those guys, and you get negative secant of x plus 1. So what's happening in this problem? Well, secant of x minus secant of x is gone. So now I have 2.
But isn't that
There's a secant squared on the bottom. Look at that second identity. It goes 1 plus tangent squared is equal to secant squared. What happens if I take that 1 to the other side? It now reads secant squared minus 1. But what did I leave behind? Tangent squared. Leave it up there. Remember, 1 plus tangent squared of x is equal to secant squared of x. The second Pythagorean identity. I would say take the 1 to that side.
I see.
So when the 1 goes to that side, that's what it looks like now. And so I'm replacing secant squared minus 1 with tangent squared. To make it a little bit easier for you guys to see, some of you might see it right there, but this is 2 times 1 over tangent squared. What's 1 over tangent squared?
Tangent squared.
Wait.
Cotangent.